I knew something was off when I walked into the office kitchen and heard the new VP say, "She still uses paper binders. What is this, 1983?" They were all laughing. Him, the new strategic realignment analyst he hired straight off a LinkedIn ad, and that HR intern who thinks Foya is a skincare brand. They didn't even stop when I stepped in. I just grabbed my coffee, lukewarm as usual, and smiled the way women do when we're calculating how long it'll take for the building to burn down in a compliance audit. The truth? My binders could vaporize this place. I've spent 17 years in that corner office with no windows, quietly stitching together the legal backbone of this company like a federal taxidermist. Every contract we've ever landed with the DoD, USDA, FEMA, and even the Bureau of Prisons has my name stamped somewhere in the digital bloodline. Was, the registered contract officer for every single file that matters. I know the federal audit cycles like I know the parking lot pothole that's claimed 3 tires and a VP's dignity. I've memorized clause numbers like they're my kids' birthdays. I know how to fold a noncompliance waiver so tight it looks like origami. And I've danced with more federal auditors than I've had vacation days. But none of that matters in a company where your value's measured in Slack emoji reactions and your fate is decided in happy hour martinis. So I kept quiet, like always. That was my job. The invisible backbone. Listen, I don't usually say this mid-rant, but while you're here, if you're into stories where smug idiots get throat punched by red tape and karma shows up with a clipboard, hit that like button and subscribe. Seriously, 90% of y'all listen without subscribing and that's fine, but we got mouths to feed and office vendettas to fund. Help a team out. Back to the crime scene. I've been running compliance since 2006, back when we didn't even have a digital portal, just a fax machine with a vendetta and a desk calendar that bled ink in the humidity. I built the entire federal contract readiness program by hand, trained 3 of our 5 legal heads. I once caught a procurement error before it nuked $1 million disbursement and didn't even get a cupcake. No, what I got was Mary's always reliable, like I was a fax machine myself. Not flashy, not fun, just there, always there. I knew where the bodies were buried, hell, I dug the trenches myself. Our last 3 CEOs let me operate in peace because they understood one thing: federal compliance is like plumbing. You don't notice it until the sewage hits the carpet. But new blood doesn't want plumbers, they want disruption. They want glossy dashboards and a compliance refresh. Enter Brad, VP of Operations and Human Innovation or some nonsense like that. Loud, polished, sweaty hands. Used to work in tech, which means he thinks federal protocol is just an optional terms of service checkbox. First day, he made a joke about unclogging bureaucratic cholesterol. Second day, he sat in my chair during a walkthrough and called my office the relic room. I said nothing. Just nodded and let him feel like a king in a sandbox. It wasn't personal at first. I'd seen this before, someone new trying to mark their territory. Most of them flame out by Q3 when they realize C-SPAN and pork barrel contracts don't care about corporate synergy, but Brad had something worse than ignorance. He had ambition with no understanding. That's lethal in my line of work. You screw up a supply chain invoice in a federal logistics contract, and people don't get medicine, or boots, or food. You screw up a designation log, and suddenly you've got an open file with no authority holding the pen. But Brad didn't get that or care. He started small, took over status calls, renamed folders, asked for read-only access to my files. Then came the team memos, compliance modernization, removing bottlenecks, real-time decision-making. I was still doing the same work, still submitting reports, but I could feel the air shift. People stopped copying me on documents. Procurement started using templates I didn't recognize. My access to the federal portal got suspended for maintenance. Then one day I walked into a meeting and my name wasn't on the agenda. My title was gone. In its place, Bradley Kent, acting contract officer. I looked around the room. HR was nodding. Legal looked sleepy. I asked when the transition paperwork had gone through. Brad chuckled and said, "Oh, we streamlined that last week. You're still looped in, just not the official gatekeeper anymore. You're not cleared for federal work, right?" I could have snapped a chair leg and gouged his eye with it. Instead, I took a sip of my lukewarm coffee. It tasted like burnt pennies and surrender. But I didn't protest. I didn't escalate. I didn't even correct him. I just smiled. Because I knew something he didn't. Something that would make that smug tone catch in his throat like a paperclip swallowed sideways. Removing a federally registered contract officer without a reassignment triggers a compliance clock. Tick tick, the meeting was supposed to be a quarterly check-in. 30 minutes of buzzwords and bar graphs, then back to real work. But the moment Brad strutted into conference room B with his shirt sleeves rolled halfway up and a lavender vape pen tucked behind his ear like a bic, I knew we were in for a sermon. He kicked things off with a phrase that made me want to staple my own hand to the table. We need to disrupt our own ecosystem before someone else does. Jesus wept. I glanced across the room. Procurement looked confused. Legal was half asleep. HR was actively nodding like bobbleheads on meth. I sipped my coffee, decaf, doctor's orders, and waited. And then he said it. Just threw it out there like a live grenade in a ball pit. Well, Mary's not even cleared for federal work anymore, so we'll be reevaluating that whole process. Silence. My mouth was still mid-sip when that landed. I had to force the swallow down so I wouldn't choke in front of 20 people. That would have been his dream headline, wouldn't it? Legacy compliance dinosaur suffocates on own irrelevance during strategic synergy meeting. I turned to him, deadpan. Actually, my clearance is current through 2026. It renews every 24 months and requires a federal background check, which, judging by your recent LinkedIn activity, you'd fail on residency alone. The room tensed. One of the interns blinked so hard his AirPods fell out. Brad laughed too loud, too quick. Sure, but that's just paperwork, right? What we need is fresh energy, modern thinking, not dusty government handbooks. He clicked the remote, bringing up a slide labeled Modernization Phase 1. My name was nowhere. Our compliance process, was reduced to a single bullet point: eliminate unnecessary gatekeepers. That's when I knew this wasn't just about trimming fat, it was a bloodletting. I'd seen guys like Brad before. Fast talking, overconfident. No clue how deep the roots run in federal work. They think a binder is a relic, a checklist is optional, and that government contracts operate like retail subscriptions. But here's the thing about federal files they don't forget. Every change leaves a footprint. Every reassignment a timestamp, and those timestamps talk louder than any VP ever could. Still, I held my tongue, because I was already formulating the one response Brad wouldn't see coming, a federal one. Later that day, I checked the internal registry. Sure enough, my name had been removed as the registered contracting officer from the new $500M Defense Logistics file. In its place, Bradley Kent acting indeed, like a kid in his dad's blazer, pretending the stage isn't on fire. No reassignment form, no federal notification, no portal update. Just a sloppy internal switch like this was a grocery list and not a binding contract subject to Title 48 of the Code of Federal Regulations. He thought it was just office politics, a turf war, but I'd spent nearly 2 decades building a fortress of protocols so airtight even our legal team used my logs for training. And now this dolt had wandered into the airlock with a match. I stared at the screen, read it twice, took a screenshot, and I pulled out the hard copy. Still had the signed officer designation form from the original filing. My signature, legals, the CEOs, and now no one had replaced me, not formally, not federally, which meant the file was in limbo, non-compliant, and under audit risk. I took a breath, then opened the Federal Contractor Registry portal. It's not flashy, that portal, pale blue interface. Font stuck in 2009, but it has teeth. I submitted a change notification. Dry language, factual, timely. No emotion, just law. Contract officer of record removed internally without corresponding federal reassignment. Please advise on next steps per subsection 4.3b, compliance trigger. Once submitted, it logged the timestamp. Then I printed it, stapled it to the signed designation form, filed both in a new binder labeled Brad's gift basket. Then I waited. The thing about federal processes, they're like microwaves, slow at first, quiet. But eventually something starts sizzling, and no one knows it's about to explode until it does. And Brad, he was still dancing around the office, stripping access from my team, calling meetings to brainstorm post-regulatory frameworks. He had no idea the bomb was already ticking, and I wasn't going to warn him. The formal email came at 4:47 p.m. on a Thursday, because cowardice prefers inboxes over confrontation. Subject line: internal reassignment, contract oversight access update, no greeting, no context. Just a dry line from HR. Per recent organizational realignment, your CO designation has been transitioned to VP Kent. Please direct all oversight-related queries to his office going forward. They even had the gall to attach a Google Doc titled Compliance Realignment FAQ. I opened it. First bullet point, Q, is this a demotion? A no, this is a strategic streamlining of operational roles. Translation, we didn't want to deal with you anymore. That night I stayed late. Not because I had work to finish. Brad had already reassigned most of my caseload to that ex-frat boy he hired to revitalize our GSA posture. I stayed to grieve, quietly. It's strange how you can mourn a title more than a person. But that's what it felt like. Funeral silence, held together by flickering fluorescent lights and the hum of the HVAC. I clicked through the portal. My admin credentials had been downgraded. I couldn't even access the revision history for our active federal files. I'd built that system from scratch, layered security levels, chain of custody signatures, internal-external sync. And now I couldn't even see my own digital footprints. I went to pull one of the hard copy contracts from the compliance archive, my archive, and found the entire shelf had been boxed and moved. A sticky note on the empty slot read, Brad, team review in progress. No email, no ask, just taken. It wasn't just professional exile. It was an erasure. And still, no word from legal. I'd worked with Janice, our in-house counsel, for years. We'd stayed late during the 2017 amendment rewrite. We'd shared pizza when the FY19 procurement language changed mid-quarter. She didn't even reply to my calendar invite titled designation questions. Cancelled at 5 minutes before the meeting. Overbooked. That's when I understood. No one was going to stop him. Not HR, not legal, not the CEO. They'd all bought the fantasy Brad was selling: streamlined compliance, digital-first federal partnerships, legacy retirement. He spoke their language. Shiny, quick, consequence-free. I went home that night and sat in my driveway for 36 minutes, engine running, NPR murmuring about some ethics hearing in DC. I didn't cry. I don't do that, not anymore. But I did close my eyes and imagine walking away from it all, just disappearing. Let Brad sign his little forms and trip over acronyms until the government froze his assets. But I didn't disappear. I filed. That compliance notice I'd triggered earlier, it had changed something fundamental. It wasn't loud, it wasn't flashy, but it had started a clock that couldn't be unticked. You see, when a federal contract has a named officer, me, and that person is removed without an official reassignment filed and accepted by the appropriate agency, the contract enters what's called pending oversight review. Not sexy, but devastating. Because all payments, deliverables, even communications under that contract become provisional. The $500M logistics deal? Suddenly, it had no registered handler. That's like flying a military cargo plane with no licensed pilot on the record. Everyone's buckled in, smiling, and the cockpit's empty. I checked the Federal Registry the next morning. There it was. Contracting Officer of Record, Bradley Kent, pending. Pending, which meant not accepted, not recognized, not authorized. Brad had submitted the name change without filing a federal reassignment form. He didn't know you can't just swap names like it's a holiday schedule. You need agency vetting, background checks, clearance validation. Half the time, it takes weeks just to get a temp designation through. But Brad thought he could wing it, probably clicked a drop-down in the system, and thought he was a genius. So now, he had a $500M contract sitting under a voided oversight chain. No officer, no authority, just a VP with a LinkedIn certification in agile federal management and a very punchable smirk. And me? I stayed quiet, didn't push back, didn't warn him. I took my access downgrade, my new cubicle near the printer, and I waited. They wanted to erase me, that's fine. You can white out a name, but not a timestamp. And when the audit clock hits 0, they'll see whose name mattered after all. The night I found the rule, the building was empty except for the janitor humming off-key to some old Motown song. My monitor glowed like a confessional lamp in the dark, lines of code and policy cross-references bleeding into my eyes. I was buried deep in the Federal Acquisition Regulation database, the driest graveyard of government text you'll ever find. When I saw it, subsection 4.3b, a procedural clause so obscure even legal rarely referenced it. It stated plain as daylight, if a contracting officer is removed from an active federal contract without immediate federal reassignment, the contract enters automatic audit review within 10 business days. There it was, my justice, my weapon, my calm, bureaucratic guillotine. I sat back in my chair, heart steady, breathing slow. No satisfaction, no gloating, just the stillness of precision. Brad had tripped a silent alarm and now the clock was ticking. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to rally allies. The rules were already sharpening themselves on his arrogance. I opened a new file on my desktop, Audit Trigger Documentation docx. Then another, Access Revocation Log XLSX. I started filling them in with the kind of detail that would make a Navy auditor cry tears of joy: timestamps, revision histories, document hashes, IP addresses from every login that revoked my clearance. Every move Brad made left a breadcrumb trail in the compliance matrix, and I was mapping it like a cartographer of doom. At 8:32 p.m., I logged into the Federal Contractor portal. The login page still greeted me by name. Welcome, Mary Hensley, clearance level, verified. That little phrase, verified, might as well have been a halo. Even though the company stripped my internal title, the Federal Registry hadn't processed my removal. In their eyes, I was still the contracting officer of record. That was all I needed. I navigated to change notifications, selected the $500M logistics contract, and started typing. My fingers moved like I was conducting a quiet symphony of vengeance. The form didn't ask for emotion, it asked for precision, and that was my native tongue. Internal reassignment executed without accompanying federal notification or clearance reassignment. Requesting compliance verification and audit review per subsection 4.3b. I reviewed it 3 times. Attached supporting documents, the HR email, the portal screenshots, the timestamped access log. Then, before hitting submit, I added one more note: short, factual, lethal. As of this filing, the contract currently lacks an authorized oversight officer. Click Submitted. The timestamp blinked onto the screen, 2107 EST acknowledged, review cycle initiated, and just like that, it was out of my hands and into the machine that doesn't play favorites, doesn't care about politics, and doesn't know what synergy means. Federal systems may be slow, but when they move, they crush. Afterward, I printed every page, every confirmation, the screen captures, the logs. I hole-punched them and slid them into a fresh white binder, labeled it in thick black Sharpie, Brad Incident, Audit Prep. then locked it in my bottom drawer, right next to a dusty stress ball from the 2013 ethics retreat and a mug that said, "Trust me, I'm compliant." I drove home through sleet that night, windshield wipers squealing like old ghosts. My phone buzzed with a company email at a red light. Reminder: all team members must route compliance inquiries through VP Kent. I smiled at the absurdity. He had no clue what I'd just done. None. He probably thought compliance was something you could toggle on or off, like a Wi-Fi setting. He'd strutted into my world and yanked a thread he couldn't even see the end of. When I got home, I poured a glass of cheap Merlot and sat at my kitchen table with the binder open. Every page felt like armor. I wasn't angry anymore, not in the way that burns you up. This was the kind of anger that freezes solid and sharpens into patience. They'd taken my name off the wall, but not out of the system. They could demote me, mock me, even erase me from the org chart, but my signature still lived in the federal record. And that record had a timer: 10 business days. Tick. 9 left. 3 days after I filed the compliance event, Brad sent a company-wide email with the subject line: Compliance Reimagined, a New Era. I almost choked on my peanut butter protein bar reading that header. Reimagined? Compliance isn't interpretive dance. It's not a Pixar reboot. It's a stack of rules older than his entire career, and a misfiled form can bring down a $1 billion contract faster than an SEC whistleblower with a grudge. But there he was, patting himself on the back like he'd just reinvented oxygen. I clicked it open, coffee in hand and eyebrows already raised. Effective immediately, the compliance division will operate under a new agile structure designed to reduce redundancy and accelerate approvals. This change reflects our commitment to lean practices and federal agility. Federal agility. Jesus Christ. He went on, bullet point after buzzword, listing all the ways he'd gutted the department. Reduced gatekeeping roles, consolidated oversight redundancies, implemented AI-driven contract workflows, which I'm 99% sure means he told an intern to make a spreadsheet, and reassigned non-essential personnel to value-aligned support functions. Translation: he kicked out the only people who knew what the hell they were doing and gave a bunch of interns access to $500M worth of paperwork they couldn't spell. And the cherry on top: special thanks to Mary Hensley for her years of service. We wish her continued success in her new supportive role. Supportive role? Like I was some backup singer to his federal boy band. I knew role was being CC'd on status updates for projects I once personally greenlit. I was, quite literally, in charge of nothing. But I didn't reply. I didn't even blink. Because about 5 minutes after that email hit everyone's inbox, another email landed in mine. This one not from Brad, not from HR, not from anyone in our little circus tent. No, this one came from a Gov address. Subject line: audit review triggered. Notification of impending compliance assessment. I clicked it open, and my heart rate didn't even flicker. Per subsection 4.3b, this contract has been flagged for review following the removal of the registered contracting officer without federal reassignment. An unannounced audit is pending. Prepare documentation accordingly. It was short, cold, government issued to its marrow. But to me, it read like poetry. I exhaled, long and slow, and leaned back in my chair. The kind of lean you do when you know you've just checkmated someone who thought the game hadn't even started. He had no idea, not a clue. While he was standing in front of the board with his sleeves rolled and a slide deck full of stock photos of American flags and cargo trucks, telling them how he'd eliminated dead weight, I was already 3 steps ahead, setting the fire under the very chair he was preening on. Dead weight, huh? It was the ballast keeping the ship from flipping. I heard through the grapevine that in his update to the board, Brad described me as old school, a procedural hoarder, and my favorite, resistant to innovation. Apparently, one of the VPs chuckled and said, "I didn't know we still had a Mary. That's the thing about invisibility, it's not always a weakness. Sometimes it's armor." Because while they were laughing, I was compiling. Every day after the audit trigger, I added more to the binder, cross-referencing invoices, delivery schedules, subvendor protocols, background check gaps on the new hires Brad shoved into clearance-dependent roles. I logged his unauthorized template edits, captured version histories, built a timeline so airtight NASA could have launched it. And meanwhile, Brad kept performing. He paraded interns into compliance meetings, claimed he was flattening hierarchies and redefining federal partnership alignment. I watched from my new desk, which was basically a converted supply closet between the janitor's sink and the window that faces the brick wall. Didn't matter. I had everything I needed, and more importantly, I had time. Because now the countdown was real. Somewhere in a federal field office, an audit team was reviewing our status, planning their approach, watching, waiting. And when they showed up, and they weren't going to announce themselves with a polite calendar invite. They'd come in like they always do: badges visible, expressions neutral, clipboards ready to eat souls. Brad wouldn't be ready. He didn't even know it was coming, but I did. 7 business days left. Tick. It was a Tuesday. No warning. No heads-up call from legal. No security desk whispering that someone from the government just signed in. Just 3 people in gray suits stepping off the elevator like they'd been summoned by ritual. 2 federal auditors and 1 compliance enforcement agent, all carrying black folios like execution warrants in soft leather. They didn't even look around. Just marched to the boardroom with the kind of authority you can't fake. And let me tell you, Brad has spent his entire career trying to fake it. I was already in the office, sipping burnt coffee and finishing a new log entry when I got the Slack ping from facilities. Hey, did you know we've got feds in the building? Oh, honey, I knew. The audit clock had reached 0. Brad, on the other hand, found out about it the same way he finds out most things, late, loud, and unprepared. I saw him from my perch by the printer as he strutted past with a face like someone trying to remember if they left the stove on. His shirt was untucked on one side. No blazer, just a flurry of undercooked charisma and BS confidence. He barged into the boardroom like it was his living room. I followed behind, quiet as smoke. The auditors were already seated. No small talk, no pleasantries. The lead agent, a short woman with a face carved from granite and a badge clipped to her lapel like a blade, didn't even look up when Brad walked in. Brad slapped his palms on the table. All right. So, welcome, welcome. Bit of a surprise. But we love surprises. Keeps the team on their toes, right? No one laughed. Not even the intern who usually giggles at his dad jokes out of fear or confusion. The granite-faced agent finally spoke. We're here to review documentation and oversight compliance related to federal contract hash DLS 500-23, the logistics operations file. Brad nodded vigorously, trying to suppress his nervous energy like a kid caught shoplifting who decides to become overly helpful. Absolutely, you'll find everything's been fully optimized. We've transitioned to a lean compliance framework, less bureaucracy, more efficiency. I've actually led a full reorg of the oversight structure personally. We've aligned our CO practices with an adaptive model. Really state-of-the-art stuff. He was stringing together words like Christmas lights, blinking, tangled. Pointless? The agent opened her folio. And who is the registered contract officer for this account? Brad blinked. That was it, just one question. 7 words, like a sniper shot through glass. He tried to recover. Oh, well, me, I guess. The agent looked up, slowly, like an old computer booting into war mode. You guess? Brad chuckled. No, I mean, yes, me. I am. It's my name on the account, internally. I was assigned oversight in a recent restructuring. She flipped a page in her folio. You were assigned oversight internally. Was that designation filed with the appropriate federal agency and verified per 4.3b within 5 business days? Now, see, Brad's gotta tell when he's nervous. He taps his thumb against his ring finger like Morse code for oh shit. He started tapping before she finished the sentence. Well, I mean, we notified legal, I think. And our HR system, she held up a hand. Not a dramatic gesture. Just enough to shut him down like a power switch. That's not what I asked. Was a reassignment form submitted to the Contract Officer Registry portal and confirmed by the agency's Contract Oversight Unit? Silence. Then Brad turned slowly toward the General Counsel, who'd arrived late and was just now flipping through his notes like he'd walked into the wrong funeral. The agent pressed on. Because as of this morning, the registry still lists Mary Hensley as the last verified contract officer on record. No reassignment accepted. No transfer completed. I felt the room drop in temperature by 20 degrees. Even the walls seemed to stiffen. Brad cleared his throat, tried a weak smile. Look, I'm sure this is all just a timing issue. The paperwork is probably, the federal record does not operate on probably. Her voice was cool and steady. It operates on timestamps. She set her pen down. Until a reassignment is confirmed, this contract has no federally authorized oversight. Brad blinked again. So what does that mean? Like, are we talking a minor delay or? The agent closed her folio. This file is now classified as non-compliant under federal audit parameters. All activities under this contract are hereby frozen pending full review. No yelling, no dramatic gestures, just facts, heavy as tombstones. The boardroom went dead quiet. The intern looked like she was trying not to throw up. Legal's mouth hung open like a loose door hinge. And Brad had stopped tapping. His hands were flat on the table now. Still, pale, sweat glistening above his lip. I stayed standing in the back, pretending to take notes on a clipboard that had nothing but an old grocery list on it. I didn't smile, that would have been too much, but I did allow myself the tiniest twitch at the corner of my mouth. He'd been so sure he could bluff the system. Thought the government worked like office politics, just say it with confidence and no one checks. But the thing about federal rules, they don't blink. 5 days left. The agent didn't raise her voice, didn't glare. She simply reached into her folio with the same care you'd use to unzip a body bag. She pulled out a single sheet of paper, thick stock, government stamped, no theatrics, just precision. Then, without a word, she slid it across the polished boardroom table like a surgeon passing a scalpel. It stopped in front of our general counsel, Janice. She stared at it, didn't touch it, didn't blink, just stared. I could see the color drain from her face before she even read the first line. Brad leaned over, trying to play it cool, but his hand twitched as he adjusted his sleeve. What is that exactly? The agent's voice was neutral, clinical. It's the internal removal log you authorized. The one removing Mary Hensley from the position of registered contract officer. She turned slightly toward him. Signed by you, countersigned by HR, dated and timestamped 8 business days ago. Then she looked back at Janice. Janice finally picked it up. Her eyes scanned the page, once, then twice. Her jaw clenched because there it was, clear as federal daylight. The removal had been processed internally, but no reassignment had been filed with the contracting officer registry. No backup designation. No temporary assignment. No notification to the agency. And worse, at the bottom of the page in bold, per FAR 1.602-1 and subsection 4.3b. The removal of a registered contracting officer without formal reassignment automatically voids federal clearance authority until verification is reinstated. Translation? The second Brad yanked me out of that role and failed to file the replacement with the feds, he turned our $500 million defense logistics contract into an illegal operation. Every invoice, every procurement, every shipment, every compliance report filed under his streamlined process now had the legal weight of a crayon drawing mailed to the Pentagon. Janice reached for her water bottle with a shaking hand. Her lips parted, but no words came out, just breathe. Brad looked around, fishing for lifelines. Okay, look. I mean, this is just red tape, right? I'm sure we can backdate the reassignment or file it now, retroactive or whatever. We're all on the same team. Agent didn't even blink. Backdating is a federal offense. That landed like a pipe bomb made of syllables. The intern quietly slid her laptop closed. Brad turned to Janice again, this time louder. Come on, legal should have flagged this. You're telling me nobody caught this? Janice didn't respond. Her eyes were locked on the timestamp. 12:47 p.m., 8 business days ago. She knew what that meant. We'd cleared the audit clock by 2 full days. It wasn't a review anymore. It was an enforcement action. One more beat of silence. Then the agent spoke evenly. Until a properly vetted and accepted reassignment is processed through the official federal channel, this contract is considered non-executable. That includes deliverables, invoices, and all ongoing activity tied to contract hash DLS 500-23. She turned her gaze to Brad. The moment you removed Mary Hensley and failed to replace her per procedure, you voided our ability to recognize this company's authority on the contract. In federal terms, that is equivalent to abandonment of oversight. Brad stammered, but the system let me do it. The agent raised an eyebrow. Your internal system isn't the government. That's when the air changed. The boardroom didn't just go quiet, it froze. A kind of silence where no one even dares to shift in their seat, where every executive starts recalculating their proximity to the blast radius. Janice lowered the document and folded her hands in front of her. She looked like she'd aged a decade in 5 minutes. She turned slowly to Brad. You didn't just violate internal protocol, she said softly, like her voice had to be squeezed out of her lungs. You've potentially triggered federal penalties, clawbacks, and oversight breaches across multiple departments. This isn't about red tape. This is about breach of contract, at the government level. Brad started to respond, but the words collapsed in his mouth, just a few desperate syllables that ended in nothing. I stood in the back, stone-faced. This wasn't my moment, not yet, but watching them squirm was like sipping hot tea during a thunderstorm. Calm, predictable, cleansing, 4 days left. Janice leaned in close to Brad, her voice barely audible but laced with pure acid. Please tell me you didn't actually sign this without a registered replacement. Brad blinked. His head jerked slightly like a dog hearing its name in an unfamiliar accent. What do you mean, we talked about simplifying? You said we needed to move fast. I figured we'd just assign someone later. Janice didn't blink. I said we needed a clean chain of custody. You said just do the form, we'll fix it later. And then you locked Mary out of the system without checking federal reassignment procedures. He shifted in his chair. Yeah, but that was just internal process noise, right? I mean, it's not like they're gonna shut down the whole project over a signature. The agent, still seated, hands folded, tilted her head ever so slightly. Her expression didn't change. Her voice didn't rise. Came like a slow blade through warm butter. This file, she said, is now non-compliant. Brad turned to her. Non-compliant? She didn't blink. All activity under this contract is hereby frozen pending full investigation. No expenditures, no deliveries, no invoices processed. Any attempts to move forward under current conditions may constitute federal fraud. It was like someone had dropped a live grenade on the table and then walked out of the room. One of the junior VPs coughed and immediately regretted it. The boardroom, this sterile, $400 per square foot think tank of mahogany and glass, fell into that rare, unspoken stillness only experienced during funerals and federal audits. You could feel the contracts in the drawers below the table start to sweat. Brad opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Wait, are you saying the whole $500 million contract is, what, paused? Agent looked down at her notes. Not paused, invalid until further notice. The lack of a properly filed and verified contracting officer renders all activity since the removal legally unrecognized. Janice exhaled sharply and pushed her chair back from the table. Her hands were shaking now, barely hiding it beneath her notepad. One of the logistics leads spoke up, his voice cracking like he hadn't used it in a week. What about our vendors? The shipment that left this morning? The agent didn't even look at him. If that shipment was logged under this contract number, it is now unauthorized. If it crosses state lines with federal markings, it becomes a legal liability. Brad's eyes darted from face to face, looking for anyone to back him up. You're telling me we're frozen? Just like that? Over a name, the agent's gaze snapped back to him. Not a name, a role. Roles in federal compliance are not ornamental, they are accountable. Silence. The CEO wasn't there yet, he was flying in from DC, probably still grinning in first class, unaware that his entire contract portfolio was about to be dropped into a legal woodchipper. Brad finally turned to Janice again, voice cracking now, desperation leaking through. Can't we file it now? Retroactively? I'll sign it. Hell, I'll assign 6 replacements, whatever it takes. Janice's mouth was a straight line. You can't backdate clearance, Brad. You can't fake compliance. You signed the removal form, you authorized a systems lockout. You pulled the trigger on Mary without a single step toward federal reassignment. He leaned forward, slamming his palms on the table. I didn't know it'd go this far. Janice didn't flinch because you didn't ask. Across the room, one of the senior finance directors closed his laptop slowly, as if that would somehow shield him from liability. Another quietly pulled out her phone and began texting, probably her attorney. The agent stood. A formal inquiry has been opened. We'll be collecting documents, access logs, and all internal correspondence relating to this contract. This includes Slack messages, text messages, and any streamlining documents filed under your new compliance model. Brad tried to stand too, but missed the timing. He looked like a broken marionette, his limbs moving too late, too sloppy. And me? I was still seated, still silent, still sipping my 4th cup of coffee like it was the warm blood of the incompetent. The audit had arrived, and Brad had just found out that you don't get to improvise your way through federal protocol. 3 days left. The boardroom doors blew open like a gust of desperation, and in stormed the CEO, face flushed, tie askew, breath coming in ragged gasps. He still had one AirPod in, like he thought he could handle this train wreck between flight connections. His phone was clutched in his hand, screen still lit with whatever half-panicked email had summoned him back early from his quarterly schmoozing tour in DC. He didn't even sit. Just scanned the room and barked, "What the hell is going on?" No one answered. Not Brad, who was now sweating so hard his collar looked like it had taken a swim. Not Legal, whose hands were trembling as she held a single sheet of paper like it was radioactive. Not the finance VP, who was suddenly very interested in the grain pattern of the conference table. So I did what no one else could. I stayed silent. Still, calm, because my part was already done. The agent stepped forward and offered the document, neat, clipped, folded once down the center. Janice took it with the hesitant grace of someone handing over a death sentence and placed it in the CEO's hand. He unfolded it. Read 2 lines, stopped, then read it again. His face changed, not just in color, though he did turn a sickly, grayish white, but in shape, like something in his bones had rearranged under the weight of what he'd just read. The room was dead quiet, waiting. The agent filled the silence with surgical precision. All pending federal disbursements are now officially halted. That includes the $500 million logistics contract under DLS 523. The CEO looked up, eyes sharp now. Cold. He turned to Brad, who was visibly trembling in his chair. You removed the contract officer, he said slowly, like each word was a stone dropped in a still pond without reassignment. Brad opened his mouth, but whatever excuse he had, whatever slimy, PR-coded soundbite he was about to vomit out, died in his throat. He just stared, blank, gutted, like someone had hit the off switch on his entire nervous system. The agent didn't wait for him to answer. She closed her folio, gathered the stack of supporting documents, and stood. She glanced around the room, expression unreadable. We'll be in touch. Then, just like that, she was gone. No threats, no raised voices, just the sound of federal wheels grinding into motion. The CEO didn't yell. He didn't need to. His silence was worse. He sat slowly, laid the paper on the table like it might detonate if dropped, and just stared at it. Brad sat beside him, shrinking in real time, and I slipped out quietly before anyone remembered I was there. Back at my desk, cramped, dusty, forgotten, I powered on my terminal and opened a new compliance file for a different contract, one that hadn't been poisoned by arrogance. The kind of work I knew how to do blindfolded and backward. I scanned through vendor documentation, cross-referenced 3 subclauses, and updated our internal audit notes. Routine, peaceful, clean. Then my inbox pinged. Subject line, notice of audit trigger, compliance breach logged, response, satisfactory. I stared at it for a moment, not smiling, just breathing. It wasn't victory in the Hollywood sense. No applause. No standing ovation. Just a single, perfect word buried in that email, satisfactory. After 17 years of silence, of being dismissed, overlooked, stepped over, and boxed out, one precise form, one timestamp, one forgotten clause brought the house down. I never raised my voice. I didn't need to. Federal compliance did it for me. You're the real MVPs of the office jungle. Thanks for watching. Smash that subscribe button, or the coffee pot might just forget your next brew.